we talking about? What are we talking about? What do you think? We good?
Let's do it.
So there we go. How's the clap? Data City Podcast, episode 36. William, how are you doing, baby?
Doing well. Let's get into it.
You got how this. All right, so we're getting into our late 20s, crazy time. And a lot of folks are talking about the idea of, I'm hearing a lot about this notion of settling down. And I'm trying to figure out, one, what that means, and two, I don't think that it really is in accord with what our brains need at any given time when it comes to being a human. Right? Humans are designed to continually chase and accomplish and do more as far as getting out and about. I like the idea of kind of finding a spot to settle for your abode, but we're not wrong on settling down. I'm trying to figure this one out.
Yeah, I think maybe just like, so settling down, that's with respect to other things you could be doing. I heard the soccer coach explain it really well. He was saying, he was teaching the coaches how to coach, and he was just like, you need to understand that the worlds of your players are on an upward trajectory. They're opening up, and most coaches, you're like reach into the world is actually narrowing down as you become more family centered. So it's less about exploring the world and more focusing on a smaller portion of the world. I thought that was a really good way to understand it, as these lenses going up as you get older, and then at some point it starts narrowing down with the number of people you're exposed to after school. Anyway,
I don't know. I'm not buying it. I think that especially, I feel like a lot of folks, there's a pressure on us. Be it societal, be it genetic. I think a lot of it's probably genetic because our life expectancies are generally shorter than we've kind of created with living in society. But I think we need to continue to get people to grow going into their later years in life. I think having a growth mindset in all stages is crucial to tackle a lot of problems that we face and stay dynamic. I think we struggle when we start to have a little bit more of that finite mindset.
Yeah, so I'm against the phrase "settle down" just because I think you're right that it's like the wrong connotation to have around that. But it's kind of. I think having a family is probably a form of an adventure for some people. Like that's a huge undertaking, right?
That's a good point.
So,
that's a good point.
I don't know. I guess it's just kind of like how you define what your next challenge is. Right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. Yeah, I think it does depend on the framing. Right? I think that if you do the family thing and settle down with someone, I use that phrase kind of flippantly, but if you frame it up right, that's important. I'm not anti-family, but stay dynamic, folks. Stay dynamic.
All right, Dan. So got a fallacy situation here. You may have seen this in when you were in school many years ago.
Many years.
It seemed to be kind of vogue to have a contrarian opinion to what was commonly accepted, to the point where actually there was like consensus around ideas that went against consensus. It was this really weird situation, and I'd like your thoughts on what the underlying logical fallacy is here.
I think I said appreciate, but I'm pretty sure it's a subtle shot at me for my word wrong, but that's okay. Challenging consensus. Someone's got to try to do it. A lot of people do it. I think that it's an interesting one. Yeah, it's kind of like an argument. It's like a weird genetic fallacy. It's kind of like just because someone is challenging the status quo doesn't mean that they're right. They could just have a really stupid idea that they deliver well. You definitely see a lot with like 18 to 20-year-olds that might discover like a new political view or something like that, and that's just like shocking to other 18 to 20-year-olds. I don't know. I would say some sort of genetic fallacy.
Yeah, I think it overlaps with a bunch of them. The one that came to mind for me was the bandwagon effect, or almost like a reverse bandwagon, where it's like ideas that are on a bandwagon are inherently more questionable. So like if there's a consensus, actually jumping off the bandwagon is the best move de facto.
Yeah.
So I think it goes wrong in a lot of different areas because in general the consensus is probably honing in on the right idea. Like you can't just always be contrarian. Eventually, if you're contrarian, consensus will shift to your right view, and now you're the consensus, right? So like it's got to stop somewhere.
And then you got to shift back and forth. Some folks just like to rock the boat a little bit, I suppose. Yeah, it's interesting. I like to point on if most folks think something that is probably at least close to being right. I could probably think of some examples, maybe one or two off the top of my head of like what do you call it? Blind spots, just kind of societal blind spots that we just like missed. Like it's definitely a thing that could be a factor moving forward.
No, for sure. All right, let's do that tip of the day.
I guess I didn't have any proper examples. I think of maybe anyway. Ran out of time. Tip of the day. So a lot of folks live their lives. I'm guilty of it as well. Focus on the next thing. Accomplishing a task, trying to get to Friday, trying to get to that weekend at 5 o'clock beer. I found that if I'm working my life in a kind of a backwards motion, kind of racing against the clock as opposed to racing forward, I get a lot more of a meaningful existence going about that. So race backwards instead of forwards.
Okay, so you're saying kind of visualize finishing the race, and then focus more on the steps to get there, kind of.
The easiest example I can think of is when I started in the sales space. So it's like in sales, there's only a finite amount of time in a day that you can get to someone during quote unquote business hours, what have you. So it was always like a race to get there, and I was saying, oh damn, like I wish I accomplished more that day instead of like, oh I wish that I had gotten to the end of whatever I was trying to do. So I think it's just a subtle shift in framing. It's kind of like the Stoic idea of perspective retrospection. It's like thinking of an idea that is happening in the future, but thinking about what you'll think about it in retrospect. It's kind of an interesting concept to play with psychology there. But
it also sounds
like useful as far as building resilience.
Well, it sounds like you had it wasn't like my goal is just a time-oriented goal of I'm going to finish. It was like I have these very clear benchmarks to get to, right? So it was kind of maybe
that's a good point.
Maybe just getting more clear. Like when you really think about it, if you have a big goal, if you're smart about things, that's going to have to translate to what you do on like moment to moment. So if you get crisp about what your actions are, maybe moment to moment, then it's kind of like you've shifted the goals to like right in front of you, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that once you get out of like the dollars for hours kind of work mindset, that's definitely a factor in changing the dynamic there. So value, working for value, I suppose.
Okay, Dan. So I heard this interesting idea. It was one of those Google Talks, and this researcher was talking about this idea of how in excess of information you have a scarcity of attention.
Right.
And the reverse is true as well. So with minimal information, you are kind of like constantly craving something to focus your attention on. And I think we need to bring back boredom. I think boredom is so underrated. But my time's up. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I would frame it as bringing back boredom. I think that I like the idea that you are espousing around less. I think it's more around the less of a constant stimulation, dopamine hit kind of society. I think we touched on that a little bit before. And I think our boy Sam Harris says it best when he talks about boredom is just a lack of attention. If you pay proper attention to anything, that's kind of one of the bedrocks of mindfulness practice is the ability to pay attention to the simplest things. You can really find incredible well-being from that. So it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, and it makes me think of just like how over-entertained we are. I mean, if you think about from just an evolutionary perspective, how often do you have a fast-moving, colorful image in front of you in like the wild? And it's like maybe once a hunt, right? Like, and then like the rest of the time is just like, okay, you're sitting, you're watching the horizon, you're planning, you're maybe doing menial labor. Just you're not in action for a lot of it.
Yeah.
You're not like entertained by new stimuli. For a lot of it, it's just like sitting and processing, planning.
Well, that's why our brains. It's such a good point. That's why our brains are just susceptible to anything screen related. It's like, how can we not watch? From an evolutionary perspective, when there's something that is bright and flashy and probably an attractive person that's on the screen and engaging. There's also this interesting the idea of it's like the concept of eavesdrop too. So it's like you see two people talking to each other in a society, in like an evolutionary situation. It's like that they can see you, so you're kind of like doing this like look away thing where you like want to act like they're. Oh, finished. But it's an interesting one because it's like
we can't turn away when we.
Talking,
is there something we don't know, right? Because if you have two people whispering, and you're in a small village,
right? Yeah.
It's probably some vital information they're discussing. Like it's a small village. It's like it's probably something that you would benefit from knowing. But nowadays, like two strangers could just be talking, and we're inherently just like, I mean, why do I want to listen? It's like it has no bearing on your life whatsoever what they're talking about. But it's just, that inherent interest is just like misfiring circuitry, which is really funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that example too. I was saying it more from like a movie or an entertainment perspective. It's like you see two folks who are in some sort of romantic situation, having a tough conversation together. Like that's not something that you're going to see very often in like an evolutionary or like a tribe setting. So and if you do, there's a societal cost or there's a cost because they'll know that you're like eavesdropping. So it's basically like hacking our brain to get the ability to eavesdrop in ways that we just never could for millions of years.
Right, but I also think because you're kind of trickling into like the storytelling learning dimension where like if you're seeing like for that example, which is like it's not just inherently about the information they're exchanging, it's more about what you can learn about relationships from that or what you can learn about what not to do with relationships from that, right? So I think it kind of overlaps if using like the couple fighting thing. That could also be like modeling, anti-modeling like form of learning as well.
Yeah, interesting point.